So I know Wendy's got a ton to cover, so I'm going to pass it on over to you, Anne.
Great. Well, one of the reasons that Wendy has been here multiple times is because she's the national expert on a topic that hits too close to home for many, many, many of us. And I met Wendy way back in the day when I found myself married to a narcissist, but I didn't even know what a narcissist was. And I found myself ill-equipped to understand the behavior and the tactics and what was going on. And thank goodness for Wendy, who's written the leading book called Disarming the Narcissist, you know, the highest respected book on the topic, and for being an incredibly empathetic person who's made her career from trying to help people and people who are with narcissists, whether it's in work, whether it's in home, whether it's family. So Wendy, you know, it always makes me smile just to see you pop up on my screen. And it makes me smile today knowing that so many of our members will get to benefit from your insight and wisdom, because, you know, narcissism is terrible. And as we talked about before this moment, being in confined spaces during COVID with narcissists shoots it up to a magnitude beyond what any of us can imagine. So please share away, and welcome to Parlay House again.
Thank you, Anne. I'm so happy to be with you, in addition to being with you and seeing your beautiful face. And I love Parlay. I'm so happy. And thanks, Ariel, for your help and support and your song choice for today, which was perfect. And it's always a delight to be at Parlay House. And so I'm happy to be back. I've met so many amazing people at Parlay House events, and it's a pleasure to talk about my favorite topic, albeit a difficult and painful topic for so many people. I know so many of you who have chosen to attend are either personally dealing with this, dealing with the aftermath of having a narcissist in your life, perhaps struggling with whether to stay or go if you're living with one. Family members, as Anne said, they can be in various places within our lives. And it is a struggle, and it's an especially difficult struggle right now in COVID times. I have found that the number of people looking for help as we've been in these isolated states has been enormous, and it's heartbreaking. We were speaking about this a little bit earlier before we started the meeting today, and it's heartbreaking because there's that loss of, you know, typical refuge, places to go, people to see, even healthy distractions. I mean, we still have healthy distractions, but not necessarily to get us far enough away or to give us the space that we may need if you're dealing with a narcissist. And the narcissists themselves, I work with narcissistic men, and I've been treating narcissistic men for 30 years now. So in addition to helping partners and other people who are offended by the narcissist, I also have treated narcissists for quite a long time. And I have to say the rate of relapse into things like gambling and addictions and pornography is quite high. Again, the seeking that self-stimulating activity to disconnect from their emotions, to deal with their frustration, intolerance, because they are so intolerant of being uncomfortable, frustrated, not getting their usual access to the things they feel entitled to, engaging in at-risk behaviors that put family members, children, others at risk. Very scary times. I mean, the times are hard enough, but then you add that and it becomes quite frightening. So
Wendy, maybe because some of these people are new to the topic, you'll give a definition of what a narcissist is. That would be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Anne. So what are we talking about when we talk about narcissism? This is a term that has been around for forever. It's a really old term. And it once upon a time was popular mostly within my industry. Not among the general public. And now it's a word that kind of lives in everyone's kitchen almost every day of the week. part of that due to the political atmosphere, part of that due to celebrityship and athletes, and just more acknowledgement, more recognition, more wisdom, more writing. I wrote my first edition of my book in 2008, and there were truly about 3 or 4 popular books on the subject. There were plenty of books written for the professional audience, but maybe 3 or 4 in the popular audience. There's probably now over 300 or more on the topic of narcissism. So we can see how there's this burgeoning, need to understand what is narcissism. And I'm going to try to debunk a few myths about it too while we're at it. One of them is that narcissists are not demons. They're not the devil. They're not born evil. You're not born narcissistic, except for the fact that babies are needy. And so it usually is all about them, which is developmentally appropriate. Narcissism is something that happens along a spectrum. So you think of it as anything from the more mild or benign to the more severe or malignant, which means, you can have your annoying show off in your life, that kind of narcissist, who can become self-absorbed at times, needs to have the spotlight, can be a bit of an obnoxious show-off. But if you travel along the spectrum into the moderate to severe range, you'll find things like controlling, dominant, more aggressive at the severe end of the spectrum, entitled to have what they want when they want it, rule breakers, rule makers, lack of reciprocity, lack of empathy, lack of remorse, inability to be accountable for things that they've done that have been hurtful to you. And I can talk about why if you want to hear more about that. There's explanations that are based in their early life experiences and temperament. So we take nature and nurture into account when we look at narcissism as a personality disorder at the more severe end of the spectrum, or as a trait at the more mild to moderate end of the spectrum. Lots of people have traits of narcissism, but they don't have the full-blown personality disorder type. Doesn't mean it's not problematic. It can still be incredibly problematic, even if they don't have all the 13 traits that I outline in my book. And certainly those that are at the more severe end can also be abusive, incredibly aggressive, threatening. You'll see things. Here's the thing, Ariel and I were talking about this earlier, and she used a word that I thought was really kind of cool to think about when you think about narcissism. You said something, Ariel, about sensing. And, sensing a person who is narcissistic. And I think what happens when you're with someone who has issues of narcissism is your sensory system is picking something up. And usually what you're sensing is this feeling of disappearing. It's either like you're not there at all. You're saying words, but no one's really listening. No one's really attaching or connecting to your enthusiasm, your joy, your pain, your sorrow, your excitement, whatever it might be, your despair. There's no connection. It's all about that other person that you're looking at. And they may not even necessarily be making the eye contact and looking back at you. So there's a feeling of being, as many of my clients have said, erased, just not there, disappearing, dissolving before their eyes. Or it's the feeling of being the target where you're very seen, but you're seen as an object for their use. So you've got some goods that they want. They want something from you. They want sex, they want money, they want to, tote you on their arm because you look good. You make for a nice trophy for the narcissist. You're willing to do their bidding. You're willing to agree with them. You're willing to be impressed by them. You're willing to allow them to break the rules. I started working with them a long time ago, and I always felt myself to be a pretty sturdy human being until I met the first narcissistic client, and found myself shrinking into what was like this time warped space where there I was suddenly doing things. It was like I was watching myself going, what are you doing? I'm apologizing for something and I didn't do anything wrong. I'm giving in. I'm ignoring behaviors where limits should be set. I'm not confronting or addressing criticisms that are unfair or hurtful. And I'm totally fascinated, perplexed, intimidated, overwhelmed, you name it, thinking, what is this? What's happening in me? And so I often say to my colleagues when I'm training on this topic, you can diagnose narcissism to some degree from your gut. A lot of sensing that takes place. So again, either just feeling like you've been erased or that you have become the target for their anger, for their charm, for their need to rescue, for their need to feel good about themselves, and for their need to have what they want. Now, all that being said, I also shared with you that I work with them, I treat them. And so there's a part of me that also knows that underneath all that bluster, all of that look at me and the entertainment and the intellectualism and the success, because many of them are successful, not all, but many of them are, and there's reasons for that too. Underneath all of that, you have someone who is usually incredibly insecure, who has great fears of failure, who has great feelings of inadequacy or some flaw or defectiveness in their makeup. Someone who feels lonely and carries an enormous amount of shame, and they don't even know it. It's buried so deep, and they've learned over a lifetime how to compensate for that. And the way they compensate is this kind of larger than life personality, master of the universe. Now, that being said, there are women who can also be narcissistic. This is not limited to men. Statistically speaking, men tend to comprise a larger proportion of the number of narcissists, but there are the narcissisters out there too, who some of you may have met or lived with or grown up with. So they're there. They show up a little bit differently than narcissistic men, usually more like martyrs, but nonetheless, they are out there. So as I was saying, I work with these types of individuals. I'm used to now, after understanding it better, working on myself, doing a lot of training in an evidence-based model that has shown to be effective in treating some challenging cases, I'm used to being able to get behind that wall, to get to that deeper insecurity underneath. And I share that with you because I think it's really important to do your due diligence. If you're dealing with narcissism, the first gift you give yourself is knowledge. Learn everything you can about what narcissism is and what it isn't. Understand it as well as you can, because when you do that, you emancipate yourself from dangerous things, perilous things like self-doubt, like self-blame, like feeling foolish. Because you can also feel when you're dealing with a narcissist, particularly those that engage in behaviors that are betraying of the relationship. And this is not uncommon. They betray through infidelities. They betray through active sexual addictions, hypersexuality, as I might call it. They engage in betrayal through gambling and drugs and other behaviors. It's a different kind of trauma when you're dealing with a narcissist. The more you can understand, the less the opportunity for you to buy into the gaslighting, because they will gaslight. And what does that mean? They will try to distort your reality. They will get you to doubt what was said, what was done, what you're believing. They will get you to doubt your own value system, if they're lucky. And I mean lucky because then they continue to be able to have their way, have their cake and eat it too, not be held accountable, no consequences. And so learn everything you can. Learn about yourself vis-a-vis the narcissist. Learn about knowing where you are the most at risk for being activated, for being triggered when you're in their presence. You know, people will ask the question, why did I put up with it for so long? Well, make sure you answer that question. You know, it's a great question, but make sure you answer it, because if you don't answer it, you leave yourself to the mercy of your memory. And memory sometimes also includes messages from early experience that are going to say things like, well, because, you know, you're foolish, or, you know, because maybe you you wanted to be treated that way, or because, you just weren't smart enough. You weren't brave enough. You didn't have enough courage, right? Answer that question accurately and honestly. I stayed with it for so long because I had children I was trying to protect. I stayed with it for so long because I didn't know what to call it, because I was taught once upon a time that you work hard to fight for your relationship. You don't just give up. I stayed with it because when I was young, I got messages that I wasn't worthy. And so it was easy to believe what I was being told by this very powerful individual who's also very bright. I'm hearing something, but it's muffled. Someone speaking?
No, I think someone's trying to speak, but I think Anne might be having some internet problems. Let me
Okay.
check on that. But you keep going for now, Wendy.
Okay.
Thank you.
So again, those old messages that, for so many women, messages of self-sacrifice and subjugation are very powerful messages, and it's part of our socialization. And sadly, it persists. And so we can find ourselves with these ideas, growing up and evolving, like, I should keep my opinions to myself. I should keep my preferences to myself. I should keep my ideas, my longings, my wishes, my desires, because to put them out there, I might look foolish. I might look silly. I might get rejected. I might be abused. I might be ignored. I might get hurt. And so I subjugate my own emotions. I subjugate my own needs and desires. We also get messages around self-sacrifice, that putting my needs, forfeiting my own needs, and instead doing and being what other people need me to be is really, it's the way to be. That's what you're supposed to do in order to achieve a sense of worthiness and value and connection. And although these messages, or schemas as we call them in the therapy that I practice, although these schemas may be dormant through much of your life, when you're living with a narcissist or you're dealing with a narcissist, boy, do they come rising to the foreground again and become very dangerous obstacles in our lives for being able to be the healthy best self that we can be under other conditions, right? You'll find yourself, I'm so different when I'm with this person. I don't know what happened. Something shrinks inside of me. I doubt myself. I blame myself. I wonder about myself. And narcissists are very, very good at this process of denying behaviors that are hurtful. So they'll deny, they'll then defend, and then they'll demean you. So they'll start with, I didn't do that. I didn't say that. I don't know what you're talking about, to, well, if I did, you can't blame me because you're always on my back, or you don't listen, or you're trying to control the situation, or you're not interested in sex enough, or you don't take care of yourself. And here they go into demeaning. So deny, defend, or justify, and then demean you, and then detach, walk away, dispose of you, and shut the door. And you're left with, well, could it be me? Could I have done something differently? Could I have made that up? Could it be that it's really nothing at all? And it's really tough, when you're left with that experience. It's very deflating to our sense of self. It's very embarrassing to share with others. And I know that. I mean, I host a forum every month for mostly women, although I have to say there's a couple of men in the forum too, but it's almost 99% women who are loving, leaving, or living with a narcissist in their lives. And it's designed for support for that reason. I also co-host a parenting support coaching seminar with Susan Stiffelman once a month, which is co-parenting with a narcissist. Just to let you know, those resources are out there. But it is very painful. The narcissist has this original wound, and it's usually the wound of having not been loved unconditionally. So what you're going to find, like deep in the, those dark spaces of once upon a time, is a child who had a lot of emphasis placed on performance and achievement, doing it not just well, but doing it extraordinarily well. And that child goes on to develop this kind of hyper autonomous, I'm not going to need anybody, I'm not going to rely on anybody, I'm going to do it myself way of being. It's why many of them can be quite successful in their fields. You'll find them, a lot of them in leadership positions or highly professional positions. And a lot of that due to the fact that they spent so much of their time trying to get their worth and their value out of their performance, productivity, and their achievement. Not wanting to need anyone, not wanting to count on others for emotional support, being actually even what some might think is paranoia. I call it just a very high suspiciousness about anyone who acts nicely towards them when it's not because they're shining in the spotlight. So they're suspicious if you're just being kind of kind and loving to them, or they disparage it, they don't value that which isn't associated with their fame or their righteousness or their sense of specialness. They spend a lot of time looking for approval. They spend a lot of time fantasizing about status and these sort of grandiose ideas and ways of being. And so much of that is to compensate for this lonely, lost child underneath. I'm not saying this to make you feel sorry for them. This isn't about feeling sorry. This is about developing a wisdom, a knowledge, a truth about what lies in the deep underbelly of narcissism, how they become who they are, why they do what they do. Sorry?
There's a range of questions that I want to get a couple of up here,
sure.
Because you tend to deal a lot with narcissists in relationships, but there are other forms of narcissists that our members are dealing with. And one is the one at work who always seems to take credit for everything, and how you deal with that in a work scenario. And the other is the female friend narcissist, who is sort of a friend, but is also constantly either putting you down or stealing the limelight. Can you talk about the way, because that's not a I'm in or I'm out, especially at work. It's a workaround.
Yeah, that's the good questions. Thank you for sharing those. And please do bring questions that go beyond just the intimate relationship. So when you're dealing with the work situation, this is a tough situation because for many people, you don't have that option of stay or go. I mean, some may, but it's pretty difficult. This is where the strategy of empathic confrontation can be very useful. It's a tricky little strategy because it means looking for something you actually know about that individual, or someplace in your heart where you can find a kind of authentic generosity that you can share with that individual without becoming too nauseous in the process. So it's a little bit like appealing to the narcissist's need for recognition, but at the same time, trying to hold them accountable so they will do the right thing. And what I mean by that is, something like this. All right, let's first define empathy and empathic confrontation. Empathy, what is it? It's not compassion. It's not this idea that I'm compelled to make everything better. It's not sympathy. It's not feeling sorry for anyone. Empathy is understanding. Empathy is getting it, really trying to walk in that person's shoes. In this form of empathy, you're also maybe adding a little bit more, little cherry on top, a little more color perhaps to the presentation. So it might go something like this. I know how important it is for you to meet those deadlines. I know how important it is for you to get the projects out in a timely way. I know how excited you get about ideas that, really seem to spark our work, really breathe some life into the work in a new way. I know how much you appreciate that. And I'm so delighted to be a part of it. And it would really, mean a lot to me to have you share that with others, in the same way that I know that you enjoy experiencing that recognition. It would mean a lot for me to be able to be a part of that, sign my name to that with you as well. So that's one way. Empathy with confrontation means being able to say, I know you didn't intentionally mean to leave me out. Now, this is a little bit of a white lie, right? Because the narcissist may not intentionally want to hurt you, but they do intentionally want all the credit. They feel they need it. They're not going to share the spotlight unless they are held accountable in a way where you can gently send the message, I see you and I see what you're doing. So this would be something more like, I know you didn't intentionally mean to leave me out on that authorship of that, project that we were working on, but I was left out. And so I'm wondering if there's something we could do either now or going forward that would allow me the credit, because I know you're all about fairness and justice. Narcissists usually are, by the way. They're always the ones saying it's not fair, it's not just. So there is some truth in that statement, even if it's not being demonstrated to you in the workplace, because they're stealing your thunder and taking all the credit. But when you give them the benefit of the doubt, that's an example of benefit of the doubt. It's using your empathy, knowing that they have great shame that lives in those dark corridors. So use your empathy to say, with benefit of the doubt, I know it was not your intention to do that. I know it was not your intention to call me out in that way. That would be so embarrassing. But I got to tell you, it was a little embarrassing based on the way you said it. And I know you're so passionate about this. And so at times, maybe it's kind of hard to censor the language, but if you could just be more careful. It was a little hurtful to me, or it was hard to sit and listen to that, or it was hard to feel left out of that equation when I was a part of it. So if you start with something empathic, if you start with some benefit of the doubt, some implicit assumption about who they are, it's not a guarantee. There's no guarantee. And some of you may be going, oh, that would never work with a narcissist in my life. It may not, but it's worthy of a shot, right? Nothing changes like magic.
If you do that and they say, oh, give me a break, you get credit all the time. I mean, that's a likely response from a narcissist, is deny and put down, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Do you feel like I'm calling you a liar? Do you want to role play that with me, Anne?
Sure.
Yeah. So did you feel like I was calling you a liar? I was accusing you of something?
Am I the narcissist?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
I have to work on this one. I didn't think you were calling me the liar. I think you were suggesting that you don't get credit and you get credit all the time.
So you're feeling like I'm being pretty unappreciative, I guess.
I'm feeling like this is bullshit. Stop worrying about yourself. You're doing fine. I got credit for this one. You'll get credit for another one.
Well, I appreciate that. And I look forward to that, actually. And if I'm missing something, then, I apologize for speaking out of turn. And clearly I've upset you.
I'm not upset. I just know you're wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it feels different to me, but I'll accept that. Now, even if they do what Anne just did, and they can, and that was a beautiful portrayal, and Anne, you've had enough experience with narcissists in your life, in the business world and elsewhere, that was beautifully played. And even when they do come back like that, and you can stay like I did in this sort of neutral space, notice what I did is I kept putting it out there. I didn't go here and get to, oh, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to say, I didn't get defensive because I have nothing to defend. So with a narcissist, you don't get defensive. I mean, they're going to expect you to do that. That's the dance. And you've got to disengage from the typical dance Instead, it's, did I upset you? Oh, did you feel like I was not appreciating you? Did you feel, oh, okay, well, I look forward to getting clearly I've upset you. I'm not upset. You're just, you're wrong. Oh, okay. I saw a little differently, but okay. Right now, you're not going to go much further if it's your boss or someone who you're counting on to maintain your job. But what you just did is you dropped the seeds in the soil. You just said, I see you. I see what you're doing, without saying that, because you can't say that. I mean, you could say that, but that might be more costly. But you're just dropping the little seeds in the soil. And if you're doing that 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, you might get a little harvest from that. And the harvest doesn't mean your narcissistic boss is suddenly going to become, your chum and be very thoughtful, but they're going to be a little bit more wary around you because you see them.
A follow-up question is, what do you do with the narcissist that tries to, and this is a little bit what I was trying to do, equalize blame? Well, I might not have done this, but you never do that, and tries to bring you down to that level of, misbehavior.
Yeah, and they always will. I mean, but again, that's part of the dance. And so if you can steer clear of defending yourself, and you might want to do this thing that it's a strategy called go into your narrator voice. So in your narrator voice, you step away from the content and you address the process. And this is just really good for any kind of conflict, but it's great with narcissists. You step out of the content and you say, oh, we're really having a problem here. This is kind of falling apart, isn't it? Because you're feeling like I'm blaming you, which was not my intention. Right? And they'll go, oh, whatever, right? But you want to you want to disengage from the content. There's nothing, if you have nothing to defend, if you have nothing to justify, don't dance. Don't do the dance. This is important in your personal relationships, in your friendships, whatever it might be. Limit setting is another strategy. So the question that came up about a friend, you have a friend who, let's say, is always stealing the spotlight, whether it's in conversation, because we have that thing called conversational narcissists who they're only listening for that little space in the conversation where they can jump in and make it all about them. They take whatever you're talking about and turn it into their story, which is bigger, better, worse, harder, more suffering, whatever it might be. They show up late all the time for your lunch date or your dinner date, without real appreciation for the impact on you or your time. So friends, narcissistic friends, can behave this way. And strategies like setting limits with them, which means that, you're literally saying, I know you have a busy life. I know you have a tough schedule. I know it was rush hour. Whatever it might be, if it's a lateness issue, I know it's hard. This is the empathy. I know, I understand, I get it. I see you. There's the empathy. I know. But, this seems to be a pattern between us. And I'm wondering if you can imagine what it might be like for me. Now, this is a big risk with the narcissist because they don't think about what it's like for you. They can't go there. There's too much of I'm the bad guy, I'm the bad guy, I'm the bad guy when they imagine themselves in your shoes. Nonetheless, they do need to be held accountable. So you can go to that place where you're simply saying, can you imagine what it's like for me? Because I've been waiting. In fact, I was worried about you the first time this happened. And the second time this happened, I was kind of worried about you. Now it just feels like, maybe we need to kind of come up with a different plan because this isn't working so well for me. Now you're setting a limit. You're going to change the game a little bit about how it happens. In the conversation, it's a little harder. So the conversational narcissist, you're sharing something about, it was so difficult for me finding out that, my friend was so sick and I feel so helpless because there's nothing I can do right now. And the narcissistic friend says, "Ha, you think that's bad? You should hear what happened to me today. You want to hear about a tough day." And off they go. And these are moments where, you know, you're doing your grocery shopping so that you don't scream out loud in your head.
What's the difference between that person and someone who's just self-centered? When do they cross the line to being a true
Great
narcissist?
question. Yeah, this is a great question. And the difference is they feel entitled to it. Someone who is self-centered, just, they have a self-centered side of them, a self-centered trait. Because self-centered can be interchangeable with narcissism to some degree. One of the biggest features, the most outstanding features of narcissism is self-absorption. But someone who has self-centered states, they can be that way, not all the time, but some of the time. What's different is that they can see it if you point it out. They may feel embarrassed about it. You may see they're upset about the way they've behaved, sometimes too dramatically, so it remains a little self-centered. They go into this huge guilt role, which is very self-centered. But the narcissist feels entitled. They feel entitled to steal the spotlight. They feel entitled to interrupt the conversation because what they have to say is much more important. So it's not just about being the center of attention. They feel entitled to that place, or they have to prove their worth by acting entitled. Because again, as I said, underneath all of this noise is someone who's incredibly insecure. And so that's one of the differences. Entitlement is a large hallmark feature of narcissism as well. And it's the difference between someone who hurts you and is remorseful and someone who hurts you and feels entitled to do as they please. What's the big deal? Why are you making such a big deal about this? How many times do I have to say, I'm sorry, okay? What, you want to persecute me? You want to hang me? What do you want to do? What's going to make you stop talking about this? How many times do we have to talk about this? I mean, you're so sensitive. This is what you'll hear. The narcissist doesn't want to deal with that. They feel entitled to be able to move on, to let it go, to dismiss it. And they feel entitled actually to just do as they please. The obstacles are tough. For some, it just may be linked to that frustration intolerance that was never firmly embedded in the discipline of their early lives. So for some, there may be a stronger impulsivity in their temperamental makeup, which is another piece of it. But these are good differentiating factors. So I appreciate the questions on differentiation.
Wendy, one of the things that you do so beautifully is you keep this, when you're role playing, you keep a tone that doesn't show the level of hurt. You slow down your speech, you lower your voice, you almost sound like you're whispering or singing, singing a song. Obviously, that's a strategy, right? What are you saying? Are you saying to that person, you have not gotten to me? Or you're saying, I'm just keeping you at this far away? Tell me why you're doing that and how we can learn to do that.
Yeah, thank you. This is a beautiful question. This is probably one of the most important questions you could ask when it comes to narcissism, and something that I will urge you to put into your own practice if you're struggling with someone right now, which is take care of that vulnerable part of you and get the vulnerable part of you out of the room, out of the dialogue. What do I mean by that? I couldn't do what Anne just described, speak in this calm, peaceful, neutral, adult-like way, this rational way. Doesn't mean you never show any emotion or frustration, but it stays kind of within this circumscribed zone. It doesn't get too big or too loud or too over the top. And you can't do that effectively if it's coming from your reactive parts, and your reactive parts will be much more vulnerable. So when the narcissist says something that sets you into a place where you feel threatened, like you're going to be abandoned, or all your goodies are going to be taken away from you, your children are at risk, you're going to have to give up yourself again, You've been taken advantage of. These hit places in us that are so vulnerable, and they do deserve a voice, and they do deserve to be comforted and cared for, but the narcissist isn't going to do that for you. So this becomes kind of like a one-man show. You've got to step in, care for, comfort, love, protect, even imagine a safe place where you can put that part of yourself just temporarily, so that the adult, the healthy, wise part of you can step forward and can, in that voice that is neutral, peaceful, narrator. Like I said, the narrator voice goes like this: I'm really upset about what's happening right now. This is really not acceptable. And while I hate to think of our friendship or our relationship or whatever it might be, our mother-daughter, our cousin, whatever you are, our relationship coming apart, it looks inevitable to me that we're going to either be setting some big limits on our contact, or we're going to just have to come apart, because this is becoming untenable. And I can feel myself getting upset, and I'm not going to dance. I'm not going to do that again. And they'll continue to keep baiting you, because for the narcissist, if they can bait you into that place where you're angry, they're angry, you're begging and pleading and desperate and upset and defending yourself, they feel secure because nothing's changed. There's no consequence, there's no leverage, there's no movement. So you've got to find this voice, this self. It's there. You have it. You know it shows up in other places in your life. And it can only be there if the vulnerable part of us is not in charge of the dialogue with the narcissist. The vulnerable part has to be secured from that. I mean, it informs us, so we know something important is happening. In the same way for the narcissist, when they're blaring with anger, or they're saying something that's coming out sideways or cynically or passive aggressively, you can look them in the eye and say, you've got something very important to tell me, don't you? But sadly, I can't hear it based on the way you're talking to me. Now, I'm talking to you respectfully, right? But I don't feel like you're doing the same for me. Oh, well, there you go again. Everything has to be said just the way you want it said. No, I just think your message is important, and how tragic that I can't really hear what it is you want to tell me. So maybe once we calm down a little bit, clearly I'm not really revved up right now, but if you use the we word, you'll have a lot more success with the narcissist, and you won't get into that back and forth again. Maybe once we, catch our breath, take a little distance, let's come back and see what that message is you're trying to convey, because I'm so sorry, I'm just not getting it. And that's, again, another way that you set a limit, that I'm not going to take the bait. I'm not going to engage in dialogue with you in this way. We're not doing this anymore. And they will be rattled, and they will keep trying, or they'll slam the door, or they won't come back to the conversation right away. But when they can see that you're holding firm to this new way of being, it's either going to begin to change up to some degree, or they'll agree to go to therapy if that's something you're trying to launch, which is usually necessary, or you'll begin to drift, which may be an inevitable need.
So I want to make sure we cover in the last 10 minutes two important topics. One is a follow-up from that on, many of us who are on the line feel empathy. So we understand, despite the fact that this person is being a complete asshole, that they're doing it because they don't feel good about themselves. They feel not good enough. They feel, all of those things that drives this horrible behavior. How do you manage the fact that many of us keep forgiving, keep coming back to empathy, keep understanding, making excuses for them? Oh, it's because they feel so badly about themselves that they feel the need to do this.
Yes, great. Another great question. Thank you to all of you, and those of you who are putting this in the chat box. Empathy, again, it's not an excuse. We don't make excuses for them. It goes like this: it's not your fault. As I often say to the narcissist sitting in my treatment room, it's not your fault that you have these parts of yourself. They are parts. right? Parts of them, or that you have these traits. It's not your fault that you've evolved this way. You can say in very simple words in your relationship, look, it's not your fault. I understand that you were given the message that you could have whatever you want when you want it, that, your father told you, do good, do well, be the best, and you could break any barrier you wanted to push through. So it's not your fault that you do this in our relationship. It's not your fault that you push or criticize the way you do, but it is your responsibility to change it if you choose to, because it's not acceptable to me. And that's the message you tell yourself too. So remember, as you're telling yourself everything you understand about narcissism, it's not an excuse maker. You're gaining this wisdom to free yourself from any doubt or blame. You're gaining this wisdom to make sense out of what's in front of you. And you're gaining this wisdom to know full well that while A leads to B leads to C, and you can connect these dots and get the whole picture, it may not be their fault that they became the way they did, but it's their responsibility. You can't change it. You might influence some changes, you might have some impact on the journey to change, but you can't change it. Fundamentally, they are responsible for that. And there's your empathy and confrontation.
That's super helpful. One of the things that I've seen since you started talking in the chat was this this fear of a linear generational transfer of narcissism between generations. Many women here are worrying about the impact on their kids. How do they prevent their kids from taking on some of that behavior? What the impact is, how you co-parent with them, whether it is something genetic. I'm seeing a million questions about family lineage and how to succeed despite these circumstances.
Yeah, thank you for that. The legacy of narcissism is a great fear for many, that this, how do you break the legacy? It really takes one good parent who is terribly burdened with the responsibility of doing the repair work, and one good parent who does the repair work, who's able to, when they see their child beginning to mimic behaviors like the narcissistic parent, to be able to, use the discipline to talk to the child. Again, not making them wrong, but helping them to see that these parts, especially if it's a gender role model. So in other words, little boys who are looking at dad like a gender identified role model, can be a very tricky issue. But if mom is saying things like, look, there's parts of your dad that are very honorable and parts of him that can be very loving and funny and sweet. But then there's parts of him that, there's times when it really hurts you. It hurts your feelings. And I'm seeing some of those parts, maybe because there's a little bit of you trying to be like dad or trying to get him to feel closer to you. So there's a lot of repair work. I could say a million things about this, and we don't have the time to, but I will say this. You can stop the legacy of generational narcissism. It's not genetic. Your child may be born with a certain sensitivity to criticism, to a certain impulsivity, a super curiosity that needs a lot more limit setting, gentle, loving, firm, not punitive. But narcissists, I think, probably come to the world with a heightened amount of sensitivity, impulsivity, and they meet an environment that just isn't adequate at being able to meet that need. That need to know limits and boundaries, that need to be able to feel unconditionally loved and accepted. So one good, healthy someone there in the life of the child, and you can make a difference at sparing your child from the mimicry and the imitation and carrying that into their young adult life later on. And don't fret when you see your adolescent acting like a narcissist, because that's developmentally appropriate. I mean, it's a critical time for using that word discipline, not a dirty word, using discipline to, set the limits with them and to help hold them accountable and to be teaching them lessons of empathy. But they're going to behave that way as adolescents. It just becomes a little bit more double indemnity when there's a narcissistic parent also in their presence.
That's super helpful. And I can tell by the conversations here that we probably have to have a whole other hour on this topic, because I think there's so many bills. We just have a minute or so left, but we've had a couple comments of people who, and I totally understand this, tend to be drawn in their dating life to people who are narcissists because they are gregarious, they are bigger than life. There are a lot of traits that, what are your, if you were to say, as you're dating, watch out for, fill in the blanks. How do these people identify that it's a big personality, but not a narcissist? I'm okay, or run screaming.
Yeah, such fabulous group with such great questions. I love these questions. Yeah, I tend to do a lot of scrutinizing with my clients once they've started going back out into the dating world again, or those of you who are new to the dating world. You want to be careful to watch. If you're suspicious that this might be someone who's narcissistic, or not even sure because it's so brand new, does this person that you're dating on the date with, are they not only asking questions, hopefully they're asking questions about you, are they also listening to the answers? And you know when someone's listening to the answers, not because they do this big bravo, but because they're connecting with your feelings. In other words, you seem to really enjoy your work, the way you're talking about it. Wow, tell me more about that. Right? So there's a kind of connection that allows you, not just what the details like a journalistic interview, but that what you're sharing is actually being taken in, and someone is really trying to know you, not just know where do you live, what kind of car do you drive, what kind of job do you have, how old are your kids. I mean, the demographics are always going to be part of the equation in the early days of dating, but you want to watch for the texture. Are they interrupting? Can they make eye contact? Are they a little too overly heroic right from the start? That's a little red flag. Someone who just wants to come to the rescue immediately, a little overly solicitous. Charm is lovely, and we can all get captivated by someone who's very charming and solicitous, but you want to be careful when you want to watch that, right? You sort of put that in a margin, and then you watch to see, is this someone who's just incredibly needy for being my hero, for winning my approval and my attention?
Well, as always, this needs to be our doubly long session, because you've hit the tip of the iceberg for so many of us on this call. And it's your expertise and your style are both so helpful that everybody who wants to continue a conversation with Wendy, Ariel will drop her email into the chat. Her website is incredibly informative. So if you're looking for, whether it's the monthly support group or resources or whatever, many people are living in tight quarters with people that scare them at the moment. It's an incredibly difficult time. So don't go it alone. We're here as a community of support for you all, and Wendy is here as an expert and has many other experts she can refer you to around the country. So this is why we do this, because we all have challenges and we're not the only ones that are facing similar things. And when we talk about it, we feel less alone. So thank you, Wendy. Amazing as always. I love seeing your face, and let's all dance out together, and we'll see you next week.
Thank
Have
you,
a fantastic
Anne.
rest of week.
Thank you so much.